3rd of November 2022. This Skidmark, I'm going to talk about Ukraine. And every person that is involved in stoking the fires of war there should sit for a moment and think, what the hell are they doing? We all know that there is many people in the West that are of the opinion that Russia just invaded the Ukraine for no reason. And they are uninformed, because if they just go and sit down and put in a little bit of effort and just start in 2014, they will know that it is nonsense. Between the West, NATO and the US, they've been prodding Russia for the past 20 years, constantly poking the bear. And you just have to go and page back in history and see what happened in America when Russia placed missiles on Cuba. But they were justified to act the way they acted way back there with the Cuban missile thing. And now they come and they plant military bases and missiles on Russia's border, and they expect Russia to do nothing about it. This was a provoked thing. And from 2014, the Russians tried every way they could to resolve the thing diplomatically, but the West had different plans. And I'm aware, and I'm sure there's a lot of people that are aware of the sinister underground scheme that the neocons in the shithouse in Washington is running, where they want to break Russia up into 4 or 5 or 6 countries. Because all they actually want to do is they want to steal the Russian natural resources. That's what they want to do. They want to steal the natural resources, and they cannot do it if Russia is what Russia is today. This West has been plundering the earth, and everywhere they're getting their fingers burned now. Africa is telling them to fuck off. South America is telling them to fuck off. The Middle East is telling them to fuck off. And Russia said, this is now enough of this. And now they're fighting in the Ukraine. And forget this fallacy that Russia is fighting against Ukraine. Russia is fighting against the West in the Ukraine. I've listened to a discussion last night where a journalist from Spain were part of the discussion group, and she said clearly, everywhere she went in the Donbass, it was general knowledge that the soldiers that are fighting there are American, Canadian, Polish and British soldiers. They're fighting there not as mercenaries, they're there as NATO units, but the West denies it. The scary part for the West is that Russia is fucking them up, big time. They cannot digest that, and it is a fact. What is another thing that is obvious, and it is becoming more and more clear from the information sources I have, is that the Russians have not placed the best of the best into that conflict yet. They're keeping a lot back, and their best and most modern stuff, there was a few instances where they used like hypersonic missiles, and there was pandemonium when they used it. But they've got a lot of other things that the West has not seen yet, and they are just bringing out enough to contain what is going on there. And I think that NATO is in for a shit surprise with that General Surovikin. Everybody was shocked and stunned and jubilated about the Kherson thing. But if you listen to the military analysts that know that what they're talking about, they'll tell you that that was a strategic master plan. And we're already seeing that there in the Ukraine. Now the Ukraine soldiers that has marched into Kherson, they are beginning to filter the civilians that is left there. And I have seen videos of how those people are being assaulted And there are many reports of people getting killed because they voted in the referendum and things. That is, the Ukraine is a cesspit. It is one of the most corrupt countries in the world, and there is unholy things that were happening there, and that Zazi element is absolutely shocking. Those soldiers are animals. They are brutal. And what they are doing to the Russian prisoners of war is absolutely mind-blowing. But they will pay for that. They are going to pay for that. The Russians are hunting them down. Russia is not there to take territory from the Ukraine. Russia is there to destroy the Ukraine military. And by the West pumping in all those weapons, the West is only prolonging the thing. The outcome is still going to be the same. And in this process, there are certain Western leaders and groupings in the West that is profiting from that war in the Ukraine. And that senator, one of that senators, forgot his name now, said that they will fight that war till the last Ukrainian. We are in a situation now that the Ukrainians are scraping the bottom of the barrel for manpower. They're calling up women and they're calling up old people. There has been reports of men that has been captured on the front by the Russians, guys that are 60 years old and 62 and 64 years old. That is not right. And the Ukrainian people are suffering terribly because of that mad fucking dog that sits in Kiev and that is taking all his instructions from the West. The Ukrainian people are being thrown into the meat grinder and the West is just promoting it. I have listened to so many debates and everywhere the question is, where the hell are the diplomats? Why is nobody trying to get a diplomatic resolution for what is happening there? But there are elements in America that is making a fucking fortune from what's going on in the Ukraine. Now this first image you must look at, that woman sitting there in that cemetery. That is Ukrainian soldiers that has been buried there. The estimates are that Ukraine has lost 120 to 140,000 soldiers that is dead, and about double that amount that is seriously injured, and then there is a big question mark over the missing in actions. Now I have read articles, incidentally on Ukrainian channels, where they say that the Kiev regime does not release the names of the soldiers that are missing in action, and because they don't want to pay compensation to the families, and there are prisoners of war in Russia. The Ukrainian regime does not acknowledge their existence, so they can also never qualify for prisoner exchanges. That Ukrainian regime in Kiev is an evil thing. And then there's this. Do you still remember the grain deal and the attack on the Russian ships in Sevastopol? Well, here Zelensky starts something again. Telegram Ukraine argues Zelensky announced the creation of a fundraising platform for marine drones, saying, "You all seen how it works." And after that, Ukraine denies its involvement in the attack on the Russian ships in Sevastopol. Those guys are, that Zelensky is dead set on getting the whole Ukrainian nation wiped out. And then we have this. New Zealand has deployed people and assets to facilitate the flow of supplies to Ukraine. What the fuck is that? New Zealand. Why? But the New Zealand population takes this shit from that people that they've got in charge. And then we've got that rabbit dog here. Zelensky announced his conditions for negotiations with Russia. Restoration of territorial integrity, respect for the UN, compensation for all losses, punishment of every war criminal, guarantees that this will never happen again. Who the fuck does he think he is? Does he really think the Russians are going to listen to his shit? After all the things that he's been doing for 8 years in the Donbass. This guy is he's taking too much of that white powder. And then we've got this, disturbing for Ukrainian people. The Ukrainian banking system is bracing for a blackout. Stable electricity supplies across large parts of the country may stop for up to a month. According to local media, a document released by the National Bank of Ukraine suggested measures that branches should take in such case. Ukraine's power grid operator had earlier been advised to prepare with emergency blackouts already being rolled out in Kiev. And that is how that country is collapsing, slowly but surely, and yet that fucking thing sitting there in charge that has been installed by the Americans refuses to talk peace. In Ukraine, lending to the economy has actually been frozen. The banking system in October 2022 reduced the total loan portfolio by 1.3% to 1.05 trillion yarna. I can't that name of that currency of theirs. This is reported in today's official report to the National Bank, which means that new loans are almost not issued, but only old ones are extinguished. It is correct. Why does Ukraine need an economy if the US and the EU pays for everything? It is Ukraine's business to supply cannon fodder in large volumes, for which all conditions have been created for finding work in the NATO troops, because it is simply a disaster with work in the country. The economy does not work. That is the reality and that is the truth. That's what's going on there. Zelensky supplies the cannon fodder. And then there was this article in the National Interest: End the Ukraine war before it ends in disaster. The National Interest, the senior Biden administration officials privately admit they believe in Ukraine is not capable of winning the war outright. At the same time, the Biden administration has ruled out punishing Ukraine to negotiate an end to the conflict, despite growing concerns on both sides of the aisle over the economic and potential security consequences should the United States get dragged into direct hostilities with Russia. Instead, Washington continues to funnel billions of dollars worth of weapons, equipment, and aid to Ukraine, despite not believing Kiev can win the war. Not exactly a sound geopolitical strategy, let alone good stewardship of American taxpayers' money. But the American taxpayers seems to be happy. They like it that their money and the stuff is thrown into the Ukraine like that. And then there's this sobering one. How much longer can the West turn its blind eye to what's happening in Ukraine? Horrifying video of the shooting of Russian prisoners of war made by Ukrainian soldiers. Cruel, systematic, and very pragmatic. Hey, where is the Geneva Convention on Prisoners of War? And sorry, it does not apply to the armed forces of Ukraine. The video is not for young children. I looked at this video. It is fucking shocking. And they video it as they execute those prisoners of war. But the West turns a blind eye. And from Fox News, 50 billion provided to Ukraine spent on real estate in Switzerland. Americans are increasingly concerned about the question of where the financial assistance provided to Ukraine goes. According to the publicist Candace Owens, the 50 billion provided to Kiev has already been spent on real estate in Switzerland. That is where the money is going. But the American public, seems to me, they're happy with it. And then we've got this. Poland connects Ukraine with Starlink satellites. Kiev had received 1,570 Starlink terminals via Poland to help restore connectivity as electricity cuts across the country leave people disconnected to Wi-Fi. Kiev has received 20,000 Starlink units since February from Western partners and donors. Well, I've got my opinion on this, but some of it actually is for citizens. How come Ukraine has adopted Nazi iconography? Ukrainians say that there is no Nazism in Ukraine, but the photos and videos published here tell a different story. In an exclusive interview, the main ideologist of the Azov regiment associate professor who was captured at Azovstal, spoke about what his job was and how exactly he brainwashed the younger generation of Nazis with his pseudo-scientific theories and the 1,000-year history of the Nezalecha independent Ukraine. Guys, I looked at that video. It is shocking. And then we have this. This could have been a what a fuck. Former President George W. Bush and Ukraine President Zelensky will hold a public conversation in Dallas amid questions among House Republicans about the importance of continuing to send money and aid to Ukraine for its fight against Russia. It's a fucking joke. And this Bush is a more of a warmonger, we all know it. And he has got no problem in killing civilians. And there's this. What was hidden in Chernobyl region? The hell on earth. From DNA experiments to adrenochrome torture, child sex, rape facilities, cloning installations, and much more. Pure evil and the failed news media and corrupt politicians. They are lying about an invasion. These bastards are guilty too. And then I saw some of the video material. It is scary what the Ukrainians were doing in that region of Chernobyl. And then you have this. In some parts of the front, the Ukrainian armed forces are made up of 70% mercenaries. The ongoing Russian-Ukrainian conflict is causing a lot of damage to Ukraine. Russia has recently replenished its troops on the front line through mobilization. Ukraine, for its part, also conducting a large-scale conscription campaign. But judging by the results, the situation does not look promising. Today's Ukraine military capacity is clearly in decline, and it can only continue to signal distress and rely more and more on Western forces. And as I said, that journalist in the Donbass confirms that. Interesting, the citizens that she had interviews with, all of them are of the opinion that Russia is fighting NATO. They said there's no more Ukraine soldiers, it's NATO soldiers. Today, mercenaries from more than 60 countries have arrived in Ukraine, and the total number of mercenaries is more than 8,000. The largest number of mercenaries came from the US, Poland and the UK. This has led to the fact that today many parts of the front in Ukraine are dominated by mercenaries, up to 70% of them, while the number of soldiers in Ukraine itself is sharply decreasing and military resources are almost exhausted. However, to Ukrainian President Zelensky's surprise, he has had to contend not only with a lack of military resources within the country, but also with a lack of military support from the West. Zelensky had great trust in the West and had high hopes for it, but with a steady stream of military aid, it is not surprising that the West is also running out of ammunition. And that is the reality. The West is basically being disarmed by the Ukrainian war. And then you get this type of fucking stories from Kiev officials. Ukraine will not negotiate with war criminals. Who the fuck are they to accuse the Russians of being war criminals? They are the people that are killing prisoners of war, and there are video evidence of. They are the people that are killing citizens that they perceive to be Russian supporters. They are putting their armor and military equipment in schools, in hospitals, and in malls, and in dense populated areas. They use citizens, civilians, as shields. And they've got the fucking audacity to say they won't negotiate with war criminals. And here you've got this. This is just a little article that goes about all the Nazi insignia that the Ukrainian military is using. You can stop the video and read that thing. And then we get this sickening cock from that Emmanuel Macron. I welcome Kherson's return to Ukraine. This is a critical step forward, the restoration of its sovereign rights. France will stand beside Ukraine people. Macron congratulates Ukrainians on the return of Kherson. He writes that he is always next to the Ukrainian people. It would be better if he always stayed close to the French people, because they organize protests, rallies and demonstrations every day Sunday in Paris. And these EU leaders, they are going to see their asses. I am so convinced of it. But they can carry on. They don't care a fuck about their own citizens. They're just behind doing what exactly the Americans want them to do. Then we've got this, who is winning, who is losing. The American historian Eric Zeus accused of Nazism and the collapse of democracy of Western leaders who support Ukraine and Zelensky. This is stated in his material for modern diplomacy. The Nazis with the overwhelming majority support Ukraine against Russia, and now leads throughout the West. Consumers and industry in the UK and Europe and even in America itself will pay high prices for the Nazi policy of the leaders. Are they in this case democracies? Good question. And then this is just the image for you to look at, to show you that Ukrainian barbarians, that is what they are, barbarians. They are destroying Russian monuments and things like that. Barbarians, that's what they are. And this that you get here is a video that I saw, and this is Ukrainian people in the west of Ukraine. Those people are rioting and protesting because they want to know what has happened to their family members that has been sent to the Donbass, because the Ukrainian officials don't give them any information. They don't know if those soldiers were killed or captured or what. They know nothing. And they are now beginning to protest. I think it's a little bit late. They better wake up and get that Zelensky regime out of the seat, because he's going to make sure that all of them will die. And then there I saw this, and I just had to laugh. Holy shitballs, Batman. Ukraine military aid from the USA was invested in the crypto FTX by Ukraine. And I'm sure you know that FTX exchange has collapsed and has now filed for bankruptcy. And a lot of that money was put into that exchange and channeled to the Democratic Party in America. Tens of billions were transferred to Ukraine, and then using FTX cryptocurrency were laundered back to Democrats. We have information that the tens of billions of dollars going to the Ukraine were actually laundered back to the US. And why are we surprised about that? And then we get this. Ukraine has become a testing ground for United Nations to test new methods of warfare and weapons, including biological weapons and medical preparations. Kiev, in the laboratories found in Rubezhnaya, tested narcotic nasal analgesic developed in the West for the NATO army, a source told RI Novosti. As the chief state sanitary doctor of the LPR, Dmitry Dokashenko, clarified, the West was testing new narcotic painkillers in Ukraine in order to reduce the cost of volunteers and specialists, as well as to hide information about possible failures. And the shit just keeps on coming out of the Ukraine. And the people in the West, the media, turns a blind eye to it. This shit must come to an end. They must start and focus on diplomacy and get a peace thing going there. But look what they did now at the G20. Fucking UK and the EU trying to shun Russia and instructing their members to isolate Russia there and don't talk to Russia. I don't know what to say, but in the end, the Russians will prevail. I'm not in doubt of that. But how many people are going to die? Please give me a like and a subscribe and share the thing. Thank you for your support.